Hi, my name is Crystal Jackson, founder of Mosaic Genius. In 2018, we lifted the voices of geniuses focused on everything from impact, health, to tech. In 2019, we want to share those stories with you. Tune in to listen to some of the most preeminent voices on things that matter. Thank you so much for your support.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Oh, come on. No, it's late. First of all, give my sister, Crystal Jackson, a huge round of applause. With me. You know, I do that because sometimes we can take each other for granted and act like, conversations like this happen every day and all day. So we appreciate you, Crystal. I can't hardly see you, but I know you're right over there. It really is pretty dark out there. Very honored to be here. We could do this. We do this all the time. So I was doing the math. We met 30 years ago, almost 3 decades ago, almost 30 years ago. I was a senior in high school at Whitney Young Magnet High School in Chicago. See, he has literally watched me grow up, right? So I've been intern, employee, mentee, now hopefully friend, right? Full circle. So just so you know, he calls me Mac, I call him King. So it's not gonna be a lot of formality in that regard. So we're just gonna go at it. But thank you for taking time out to be here. We're always together, we're always talking. There's a lot that we can talk about, but in this brief time, as the oldest son of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, tell us what you've been up to lately to keep the legacy of your parents going.
Wow, we could be here for a while. As I think about what I have been working on, these are some very challenging times for our nation. And my father and mother dedicated their lives to what my dad would call the triple evils. Unfortunately, those evils are still within our midst. So the eradication of poverty, racism, and Dad said militarism, but I've added militarism and violence because I see them as connected. And in our society, if we do not reduce or eradicate those ills, then our society not only is doomed, but it will ultimately implode, particularly down the trajectory we're going today. So we have always used nonviolent principles, attempting to teach people how to live together without destroying personal property. And our society is so fast-paced that we still have not learned the message of Martin Luther King Jr. nor Coretta Scott King. Dad was here a very short period of time and made a profound impact upon our society and world. And being in that family, maybe I didn't even understand it, certainly not as a kid. I understood some of the work that he was doing, but I really did not understand just how profound, and even as a 60-year-old man, I'm still learning from Martin Luther King Jr. As my dad, I learned all I could in the 10 years that he was in my life. But as a 60-year-older, there are still things that are not known as it relates to who he was and his message, how prominent. We always knew that he was prophetic, his message was prophetic. Because if you remove some of the verbiage from even some of his sermons today, you remove the word Negro, you would say, wow, that just happened yesterday. I mean, that's how prophetic his message and messaging is today that we can apply to our lives. My mother took it to another level by creating the Martin Luther King Center located in Atlanta, not just to house the remains of Dad, and now Mom, of course, is there as well, but to institutionalize that legacy. I've chosen, in a sense, to hopefully take it to the next level, because one of the things we need to do is we need to find ways to teach and train people from kindergarten to 12th grade in nonviolent principles. So we have a curriculum that exists from K to 6, and we have a team that is assembled now to help us develop that full curriculum from K to 12. And then the task, of course, of getting it not just but online primarily, but physically from time to time, going around institutions, sharing this, because we're at a point where our society not only could implode, but, you know, I really do believe we're at a point where Dad's words are so true. If we don't learn nonviolence, we may face non-existence. Black people didn't ride the buses. 60% of the ridership was black. Now, if we could organize and mobilize a campaign of that nature, and I don't want to call out any particular companies like Nike, but I don't want to call them out. I'm just saying, you know, the bottom line is, it's where we as a nation choose to exercise our buying power. And when we decide to say we're not going to support that for now, those companies will come and help us resolve the issues, whether it is police brutality and misconduct, whether it is issues around the environment. I mean, there are profound issues around. I mean, how do we live in a world where, you know, there's no concern about, I'm not saying in this room, but there seems to be a constant barrage coming out about climate change, and it does not exist. Now, if your water, and we're 70% to 80% water, and your air is gone, then it's over. It's phenomenal. So how are we not focused on ensuring that we have clean air and clean water and an environment that is friendly for sustainability? That's got to be one of the top issues on the planet. Mom, when she was in college, had gone to be engaged in peace demonstrations. And because she and Dad were reading the same books when they were in graduate school, Dad at Boston University and Mom at the Boston Conservatory of Music, they became one because they were partners in mind in terms of the world that they wanted to help create. They wanted to see become. So as I said, before Dad came out against the Vietnam War in 1967 on April 4th, 1 year prior to his death, 1 year prior to him being killed, Mom had been adamantly against war. As I said, back in the days when she was in graduate school, when she was going to demonstrations, Dad used to say, well, you know, his wife brought him along. It wasn't that he brought his wife along, but they were it was a true partnership. So I think that as it relates to technology, not only would she embrace, but she would hopefully be leading some of these movements. You know, like we've got to understand the issue of net neutrality. And I mean, there's a whole myriad of issues. But her major issue, as well as Dad's, and my concern, is access. Just because the technology exists does not mean that communities of color have access to it. So, you know, you could say, well, on your own you could find out, but the reality is there's so much information out here in the universe. How do we know? I mean, when we talk about fake news, for example, unfortunately, that's a reality. It's far more of a reality today than it's ever been, but it's a reality. So how do you determine what is truth and what is not? Part of that for me is there's something called mother wit, or something that you have innately, and we don't always use that. We allow society to sort of program us, but we got to learn to use, what is it that nature is telling you? What is it that God is telling you? And, you know, you may say, well, I don't believe in God. But there are too many things in the world that are happening. In the universe. I mean, even in the universe, we got to know that the universe does exist. I remember Dad did a sermon called, Is the Universe Friendly? And, you know, there's so many things that are happening that we got to become more conscious, so that when you become conscious, then you know, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
From a technology standpoint, how do you feel about how your father, especially how his image, likeness, and words are used from a technological standpoint today? I know there's been some controversy around that. Tell me from your perspective, tell us from your perspective how you feel about that.
Well, you know, I have mixed emotions about it. I think, again...
By the way, I slipped that one in. He didn't know that was coming.
Again, I think that anytime one hears those words that he actually articulated, there is something positive that can happen, because most people only know or believe they know what he said around "I have a dream." Well, there were thousands of speeches and sermons, and many of them were quite profound. And so when you hear different words, they say, "Oh, I didn't know Dr. King said that. I didn't know." And again, particularly with young people, because, you know, we don't see Martin Luther King Jr. as radical or revolutionary. We see him as docile, as humble. He was not docile. I mean, it actually was revolutionary to take positions to go into the South, where folks do not play. And even to this day, you know, there are still some things going on that shouldn't be going on. And yet, to stand up to those systems, and it ultimately caused those systems to collapse by using a philosophy that is not, it's aggressive, but it's not physical in that sense. I mean, that's quite amazing. And today, we need to look to those models and modalities to use and employ as strategies throughout America. Because, again, you know, I don't think there's nothing that we cannot achieve as a nation. And the diversity that has existed has made us really great. It's not, I don't know what great again means. I wish the president had used the phrase, "Make America Great," then I can be with you.
This discussion. He said, and I quote, "Yet, in spite of these spectacular strides in science and technology, and still unlimited ones to come, something basic is missing. There is a sort of poverty of the spirit which stands in glaring contrast to our scientific and technological abundance. The richer we have become materially, the poorer we have become morally and spiritually. We have learned to fly the air like birds and swim the sea like fish, but we have not learned the simple art of living together as brothers and sisters." And then the second one, and then I have a question for you. I quote, "I wish that I could say that this is just a passing phase in the cycles of our nation's life. Certainly times of war, times of reaction throughout the society, but I suspect that we're now experiencing the coming to the surface of a triple-pronged sickness that has been lurking within our body politic from its very beginning. That is the sickness of racism, excessive materialism, and militarism." So my question to you is, as we sit here in San Francisco / Silicon Valley and the global nexus between tech, wealth, and one of the most challenging homeless crises in our nation, what do you think your mom and dad would say to this community?
Wow. You know, I don't know that any of us, even as Martin King Jr. and Coretta Scott King's son, I'm not sure that I could exactly say what they would say beyond "enough is enough and we are not going to accept it anymore." But I think, you know, first of all, had Dad lived, we'd be on a totally different trajectory, I believe, personally. Certain things that have come to pass maybe would not have come to pass. And so we may not be talking about these current issues. We may be talking about some other challenges. But wherever there are great challenges, there's also great opportunities. And I think that certainly, you know, Dad would be very concerned about not just the African American community, but he would be concerned about the fact that today the African American community spends $1.2 trillion. I mean, an astounding amount of money that is spent, which is the operative word, spent. And my mom would be just as concerned, equally as concerned. But yet, what does the community have to show for it? I mean, we have black institutions like banks, some insurance companies. We have black contractors, and we have black businesses in every respect. But in the banks, all the banks together don't have $10 billion. I mean, there's something wrong with that. And I'm not talking about segregation and separatism. I'm talking about supporting one another, so that then you can be more significantly able to contribute to the whole community at large. But you can't do that if money comes in and goes out. We know that in many communities, money circulates 10 or 12, 15 times, sometimes 25 times. And in some communities, it may never leave. So if we could just keep money for maybe a few weeks, we could change the world. Right. I mean, that's serious. So I think they'd be thinking about, how do we get back to that consciousness? Because our institutions used to be strong. One of the institutions that still exists and still has some strength is the African American church. But beyond that, our other institutions are not as strong as they need to be. And our churches, quite frankly, are not as strong and don't have enough of a tendency to work together. See, we also have to learn how to collectively move forward. And we have to, we had to go through some phases because we've been so exploited and divided and been taught to hate so much. I mean, if you think about it, when I was growing up, there's synonyms for words. Everything black was negative, except for if you have a business and you're in the black, you're doing great. But everything else, black cat, that's negative. Brown cake, devil food cake. It goes on and on. If you conspire against someone, it's called blackmail. Now, everything white was positive, angelic. White cake is angel food cake. So I'm saying all of this has been programmed for years, which has caused black people and others to dislike us. And so we've had to overcome all of that. I'm not suggesting that we're just victims, because you never will achieve what you need to achieve if you maintain, well, they're mistreating me. They are mistreating me, but I'm going to do this in spite of. That's what Dad and so many other, and Mom, so many other leaders taught. In spite of how you're treated or not treated, you're going to achieve the dreams and goals and aspirations that you want to achieve, because you can. And it's in you. We have to find a way to promote that element. And that is what's going to help to, I think, from a trajectory standpoint, propel us as a nation forward.